Hello, everyone. We'll just wait for just a moment while people sign in. Thank you for your patience. We'll give it just a few more seconds for people to log in, and then we'll get started.
Rebecca, just quickly, the chat, as we're going through the webinar, there's a few resources that I'd like to share. So am I able to share those with everyone?
You should be able to.
Okay.
Yes. Just make sure you change where it says in the chat.
Yeah,
Make sure you change it to everyone.
perfect.
Okay, great. We'll go ahead and get started if you're ready. Matthew, is that you're set?
Yeah,
Okay,
great.
wonderful. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rebecca Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League. We are the citywide advocate for historic resources. We're thrilled for you to join us this evening for a walk through River Terrace. And I would like to just thank our sponsors who make these events that are free to the public available to all of you. And of course, to thank our members for your support as we're in these kind of weird times here in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to turn it over now to Matthew McClure and Jesse Hollis McCarthy, who are the historians on this project, who will introduce you to it and then take you through. Matthew?
Thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate that. We've got limited time, so I know that we just want to jump as quickly as we can into the presentation, but I just wanted to say thanks on behalf of the River Terrace Community Organizations, Art, Culture, and Events Committee for everyone taking time out of their Thursday evening to attend this webinar. Thanks, of course, to the Preservation League for giving us this opportunity to highlight our amazing neighborhood. And thanks to our community and every River Terrace resident that's given so willingly of their time and resources to put this webinar together. It's been a truly collaborative, volunteer-based effort that's been done while everybody else is juggling full-time jobs and other commitments. Um, so the timeline for our presentation, it's all pre-recorded, so we will present shortly, and that'll be followed by an opportunity to learn more about signing up and for our physical a tour in spring, our history tour in spring in River Terrace. And then there'll be a Q&A session where you'll be able to ask our committee members any questions you might have. Yeah, so over to you, Jesse.
Terrace is a small cul-de-sac community of about 2,000 residents located on the bank of the Anacostia River in northeast Washington, D.C., in between D.C. Route 295, East Capitol Street Northeast, and Benning Bridge. It is the city's only planned unit development with unimpeded access to the Anacostia River and was first developed on rural farmland by Myron Davey and Frank Murphy in 1937, who circumvented D.C. legislation aimed at limiting the construction of new row homes in the city by registering River Terrace as a planned unit development. River Terrace's original row homes were designed by George T. Santmyers and featured architectural elements designed to be reminiscent of an English village. Steel-framed windows, steep slate roofs, mock Tudor beams, door hoods embellished with decorative wood brackets, and open porches with rustic wood pillars. Once a whites-only community of affordable houses, River Terrace was one of the first neighborhoods in D.C. to desegregate in 1949 when restrictive covenants and house deeds were declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in Shelley v. Kramer. Many of D.C.'s Black luminaries have since called River Terrace home. Environmental activist and author George Gurley, Tuskegee Airman Major L. Anderson II, Luvenia C. Miller, RPB, the first African-American woman to serve on the Board of Governors of the Biological Photographic Association, and Otis von Blassingame and his wife Georgetta Childress Blassingame both civil rights activists and social reformers.
My name is Candace Tiffany Gordon. I'm an actor, writer, and a third-generation River Terrace resident. My grandparents, Frank Carroll Gordon and Lucia Datcher Gordon, moved into the neighborhood in 1950. They raised 2 children here, my father, Howard Frank Gordon, born in 1951, and my aunt, Evelyn Datcher Lee, adopted at age 3. Evelyn later had 1 daughter, Carlotta. My grandmother was a homemaker and gifted seamstress. My grandfather served in the military, worked for the post office, and eventually joined the staff at the White House under President Lyndon B. Johnson. My father grew up loving animals, especially dogs and cats, and in 1972 he opened Great Day Pet Parlor at 1221 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, later known as Professional Pet Designs. Frank, as most people knew him, built a thriving grooming business and loyal client base on Capitol Hill through talent, integrity, and a deep understanding of the animals he cared for. That same gift is how he met my mother, Linda, while responding to a call regarding her very protective and ferocious German Shepherd, Dixie. Skill, wit, and charm won over the dog and the girl, and in 1976 they married. They had 2 children, my brother Eric and me. For more than 7 decades, my family has found community, stability, and prosperity in River Terrace. We're proud of the legacy that started here, and I look forward to the future with gratitude and excitement for all that this neighborhood continues to become. We are, right now, making history.
Hi, my name is Matthew McClure. I moved to River Terrace in 2022, at the end of 2022. I'm a new resident. I am a historian and an author. So I will speak about the methodology behind the River Terrace History Tour webinar, which is the what, who, why, and how behind how we came to put this webinar together. I wanted to preface that with some notes, some important notes, the first of which being that no tour can ever claim to communicate a complete history. This tour also builds on past historiographical efforts by neighbors and activists from both inside and outside of River Terrace. The RTCO, Arts, Culture, and Events Committee, and this tour are part of a much larger historical preservation context and ongoing discussion about preservation of history and heritage east of the Anacostia River. We know that words and terms are contested territory. We found this out when we were organizing this tour, when we were involved in a discussion between how neighborhoods are defined versus communities and how those have different associations and connotations in a southern US context versus a northern US context. It's also important to mention that no historical timeline is linear, and River Terrace's history and legacy is not in the past. It is living, it is changing, and it is breathing constantly. So why we're doing this is the threat of displacement. Displacement often is, well, urban development is often twinned with displacement. And we know that there is a lot of urban development happening in and around Wards 7 and 8 and in and around River Terrace. Those specifically would be the new RFK Stadium, which is slated to open in 2030. DC Route 295 is currently undergoing upgrades. And there is rumors of a casino that is being pitched for development on Reservation 13. Which is just across the river from River Terrace. It's also important to mention that urban development, when done correctly and in consideration of the neighborhoods it affects, is not necessarily a bad thing. Another reason why this is important to do is because our community elders and leaders require and deserve formalized opportunities to have their histories recorded and preserved. But we say that while also acknowledging that storytelling and oral history traditions are already a deeply ingrained and enduring element of African American and Black communities in a US context. And we're building on that tradition. It's also important to mention that the first generations of Black residents in River Terrace are now older, and many of them do not have access to updated technology or resources or opportunities to tell their stories in this formalized way. So that is what we're hoping to do through developing this webinar. But the tour is also a celebration because what we're trying to do is surface existing historical archives like that of past and present resident historians like Miss Deborah Grimstead and Michelle Hall Russell. Miss Grimstead's archive was compiled as part of a DC Art Bank's River Terrace Medallion project, which was funded by Humanities DC in 2015. Ms. Grimstead worked with artists Charles Bergen and Brandon Bailey and historian Mara Cherkassky. The project included a website, a River Terrace Wikipedia entry page, and 18 steel cut medallions, which document the history of the neighborhood from pre-European contact through to desegregation and modern day. Miss Hall Russell is the author of a book titled The 1968 Riots Through the Eyes of an 8-Year-Old Girl. So how we're doing this, we're basing the tour on material and oral testimonies that come from within the community and emphasize the themes of the selected themes of home, community, and activism embodied in River Terrace. So in that sense, it's been a material motivated process of research. And when we say materials, we're specifically referring to photographs, maps, newspaper articles, letters, certificates, official documents, pamphlets, oral histories, in the sense of a living, breathing, active archive that helps to tell a story about the history of River Terrace from pre-European contact through to the present day. So that is, tangible ephemera, which is photographs and maps, and intangible ephemera, which would be, an example of that would be oral histories. So what we've been thinking about as we plan this tour is those keywords: what is home in River Terrace, what is community in River Terrace, and what is activism in River Terrace, and what do those look like in a real sense. And that is why we will introduce you later to the von Blassingame family, because we have collectively drawn the conclusion that their story in River Terrace is representative of these elements. And hence we are focusing this webinar on the von Blassingame family. It's also important to just reference some of the existing work that has used oral histories and tangible and intangible material as a foundation. We've looked at John Johnson, the poet and rapper, his Anacostia Unmapped project, which is a process of storytelling through oral histories in Anacostia in DC in Ward 8. Amin Al-Siwi and Phil Booknight's East of the River documentary, where oral histories are used in a documentary format that aims to bring restorative justice to Kelvin T. Mock. The History, Arts and Science Action Network documentary, titled If These Stones Could Talk, a documentary that uses oral histories and gravestones as material to bring restorative justice to family members affected by the displacement of their relatives from the Columbian Harmony Cemetery at 9th Street Northeast and Rhode Island Avenue Northeast. And then, of course, Alison K. Hoagland's book, The Row House in Washington, D.C., A History, was an invaluable resource in terms of understanding the unique experience of living in a row home in DC. Hoagland's book did not cover row homes east of the Anacostia River, but we have decided to include that in this webinar because living in a row home, as anybody would know who does, is a unique experience. And then Gail Eslow's East of the River, Continuity and Change, published by the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum, was an invaluable resource in terms of the context of understanding the context of African-American neighborhoods and communities east of the Anacostia, their self-reliance and self-development in light of historical underservicing and underdevelopment. We've done some work already. There were a few articles published in the East of the River News magazine, written in September 2023 and December 2024 that cover River Terrace histories through oral histories. And the American University's Humanities Truck was recording oral histories at the River Terrace reunion picnic last year in 2024, which was held at the River Terrace Park. and we can connect you with that link so that you can listen to those oral histories in your own time. We are also still working with the National Park Service, with the National Capital Parks East, to install signage at the historic River Terrace Rose Garden, which was established in the 1960s and is emblematic and representative of the spirit of community, home, and activism in River Terrace. Was that long?
Nope. Know what you're saying is a work in the history. Nope. Hi, I'm Jessie, and I've lived in River Terrace since 2019. And as part of this project, I've been really diving into the history of what was here before the 20th century and who was here. I should note that this is really early work. This is really preliminary findings. In preparation for this webinar, I uncovered 13 more names that I didn't previously know about. So just know what you're seeing is a work in progress to get us started. All right. So how did the community and houses you see today come to be in River Terrace? Well, there's one consistent truth about River Terrace. No one knows where we are. We are located off Benning Road between the highway, the river, and East Capitol Street. But if you've lived in the neighborhood long enough and you've told someone where you live in DC, odds are they're going to have no clue what you're talking about. So we're going to go back through the history of the maps of River Terrace to show how the community you see today came to be. So let's start at the very beginning. Okay, maybe that's a little too far back. Hold on, let me jump forward in time. Here we see John Smith's map of the area, and on it you can actually see where Washington, D.C. and River Terrace included is on the map. We know that this community was within the radius of Nacotchtank, a palisaded village of the Nacotchtank or Anacostan people, who are the first recorded residents of this space. Those people were displaced during the colonial period and later in the larger development of the capital city. But displaced does not mean gone, and DC and River Terrace with it sits on the ancestral lands of several nations. And the Anacostans, or the Nacotchtank, depending on which name you're using, do have descendants of their community still in the area, known as the Piscataway or Conoy Nation, which is still extant. So when we see that community displaced, we do see European colonists, and then later, when it's the federal city, Americans moving into this land. Now, River Terrace historically doesn't really get a lot of love or attention until the early 19th century, when a man named Benning, you recognize his name from Benning Road, builds the Benning Bridge, or Benning's Bridge if you're seeing it on maps. And that connects east of the river and west of the river across the Anacostia, allowing for more movement between the communities here and the federal city. Now, that bridge is important because it's the only other crossing when it's built across the Anacostia, except for Pennsylvania Avenue. So it really opens up the neighborhood. In the 19th century, we are going to see a man named S.B. Skaggs, or Selby B. Skaggs, depending on how you see it listed, who owns a lot of the land in River Terrace. You'll see, depending on the map, his land sort of stretching from the river towards where the Benning Avenue Metro is today. And we know that he was a Methodist minister. We know that a portion of his land was seized in the lead up to the Civil War in order to build a defense for Washington. So we see his land is seized for the building of Fort Chaplin and Craven during the Civil War. We also know that Skaggs, who was farming the land, held in enslavement 3 individuals, and we see them in tax assessments and records from the late 1850s leading into the Civil War. And we know 3 of the names, the people who were enslaved here on Skaggs land. We know that there was a man named David, possibly with the last name Stewart, who was 42 years old when he appears in the record. We know there is a child. Her name was Eliza. She was about 1 year old at the time of the record. And we have a woman named Mary with the last name Beale attached, who is about 20 in that record. And so those are some of the residents we see in the pre-Civil War antebellum period here in River Terrace. Now, the neighborhood shifts with the Civil War. The Civil War is massively disruptive for the nation, and we see the fortifications that ring DC in the years after the war. Some go away, some you'll see still today as like hills and parks around the district. But if we look in the post-Civil War period, we do see the neighborhood has changed. This map shows that time period from after the Civil War. This is from 1879, and yes, we still see Selby Skaggs on the land. We're starting to see some pathways crossing from the river into the deeper areas, but we also see some different things. Skaggs has diversified from just farming, and he now is in some sort of business that you see right on the river. You're also going to see some new landowners in this. And what's really interesting is we see 2 women with the last name Farr. On another map, they're listed as Mrs. Initial Farr and Mrs. Initial Farr, so using their presumably husband's initials. So we do see a history of female land ownership along Benning Road, or Bennings Road as it was called at the time, in River Terrace. And we're still tracking down that last kind of blurry name. It seems to be a little bit harder. If we jump forward again in time towards the turn of the 20th century, so this map is from 1891, we're going to see that one of the Farrs is still here. Another is an unmarked lot that we are looking at. So one of the Farr sisters, or Farr sisters-in-law, or Farr family members, we don't know their connection, has since left. We also see Skaggs, or Scraggs, depending on how his name is said, still here. And we also see the name Magruder in that corner lot at the intersection of where the railroad and Bennings Road is. Still called Bennings Road, by the way, at this point. Now, by the 20th century, the layout has started to change again. Here we see 1907. Those familiar names from the 19th century, Scraggs, Skaggs, Farr, Magruder, they're gone. And what you see instead is the beginnings of the street grid that we know today has been laid down. And you'll see the street grid further develop as we move forward in time to the 1920s. And here you can see it on the map. I've got a zoom in for you, where you can see in 1929, the neighborhood grid as we start to know it today is very visible. And if we go even further forward in time to 1937, the year the foundations of the neighborhood are laid, you see 1, Bennings Road has become Benning Road as we know it today, and 2, you're going to see familiar names on the map. If you came to River Terrace, you'll see things like Baker Street and Clay Street and Anacostia Avenue and Kenilworth Avenue clearly marked on the 1937 map. In 1937, River Terrace begins development as the city's only planned unit development with unimpeded access to the Anacostia River. And it was first developed on that farmland by Myron Davey and Frank Murphy. Now, the houses, which follow a English Tudor style village, were designed by architect George Santmyers Jr. He's fairly prolific here in DC, designing buildings around the city. I always say if you see something that looks very kind of English architecture inspired, there's a pretty strong possibility that it's one of Santmyers' buildings. And this planned community was advertised as affordable housing or accessible or reachable. They were basically saying that it was designed for people of what today we call working class background with these affordables. And it was planned as a segregated community and a whites-only community. In 1948, the Supreme Court in Shelley v. Kramer rules against the segregation of neighborhoods like this, and River Terrace begins the process of desegregating. The first Black family moves in. This is the Von Blassingame family. In building the tour, we looked at this complex history of River Terrace. And so next you're going to see a sample of what a tour stop looks like. This one looking at the Von Blassingames. You're going to hear a general history prepared by a community member. You're going to hear an oral history collected from someone who was living in River Terrace at the time and personally witnessed the transition of the neighborhood as it desegregated. And you'll also get an exploration of artifacts gathered from community members with historical context for them to help you understand what you're looking at. All of these will be available on all the tour stops if you come to the physical tour in the spring.
Hello, my name is Dolores. I moved into River Terrace November 2000. The main reason for me moving here, other than being affordable, was that it was like a suburb in the city, a small and quiet place with very little car or pedestrian traffic. And so over the years, I've gotten to know many of my older neighbors. They have told me many stories about River Terrace. One of them happens to be about the house next door to me. In 1949, the Von Blasingames were the first Black family to move into this all-white neighborhood. Neighbors from both sides harassed them, peeped into the windows, and set fire to their trash cans. The neighbors even asked them to sell their house for very little money. However, the Von Blasingames were steadfast into staying in River Terrace. In 1951, Mr. Von Blasingame became the first president of the River Terrace Community Organization. It's been said to be one of the longest-running, continually active community organizations in the country. By that time, River Terrace became integrated until the school was built, which prompted the whites to move out because they did not want their kids to associate with Blacks. They were a family of 3 at the time: Otis, his wife Georgetta, and Otis Jr. They later had 3 more children: Burl, Gail, and William. Otis was a marketing manager for Washington radio station WOOK, a historic radio station that was a pioneer in Black-oriented programming. His wife Georgetta worked at the Atomic Energy Commission, doing classified work about nuclear fallout during the 40s through the 60s, in which she helped organize the first academic conference on atmospheric fallout. In 1966, citing the recent passage of the Civil Rights Act, she filed the second ever lawsuit for discrimination against the AEC, claiming that she had not been promoted because of her race. She alleged that 3 other women holding the same title of research contract assistant in the AEC Division of Biology and Medicine were grade 7, while she was only grade 6. The proceedings were closed to the public. The Von Blasingames moved into the River Terrace for home ownership with a yard and proximity to a park and the river. Today, River Terrace is still a quiet community, so much so that many residents make River Terrace their forever home.
Okay, my first memory of River Terrace was when we came to visit a family that moved here, Dr. Barbie and his wife Mildred. They lived in the corner house right on the alley between going towards 34th Street. I mean 34th Street. I'm sorry. They moved here, and they had lived on the corner of Nichols Avenue and the street that's behind. Oh God. Okay, I can't think of the name. Anyhow, they moved here. He was in the Air Force, and he became a dentist. And they moved to this neighborhood soon after the decree was made that this was a mixed neighborhood. Okay, and so Mommy and Daddy came to look at the house, and they came in October or so late September or October of 1950. And Daddy died on November the 3rd, 1950. And my uncle was in the process of making a deal to buy a house. It was not this house. It was a house on Baker Street. And so my mother was in the elevator talking to one of the neighbors, one of her coworkers, and they told her that she told them she was looking to move because the doctor said it was good for my grandmother and I not to be in that apartment. And so, and there would be a yard for me to play in and children in the neighborhood. And so I would be coming here. So my uncle found my mother was getting off the elevator, and one of the men who was custodial work at GSA said to her, he said, Louise, he said, I'm going to have to sell my house because my wife doesn't want to stay and be around Black people. And mother said, oh. And so he said, yeah, he said, I don't want to go. He said, but I've built a closet in the front room and another closet. And he said, it's a 2-bedroom. And he said, and we got a lot of kids and we got kids sleeping in the basement. And so, it's not remodeled or anything. And he said, so my uncle came to look at the house, and then he came and bought mine. I moved in here on August 15th, 1951. And this past August, I celebrated my 75th year here. It was interesting because we experienced a few little terrifying moments to a child. One of them was the guy, he lived with his mother on the corner of 34th Street and Clay on the, I guess it would be when you're turning on the Clay, it was the house on the corner across from the Bass House, crossing the bus stop. And he shot up the corner, shooting at Black people. And he was arrested and determined that he was a little off the kilter there. And they took his guns and stuff, and he stayed there. And then his mother died, and then he kind of disappeared. I don't know if he died or what happened to him. I don't remember. And then there was a burning of a cross on Reverend Allen's front. That was sort of terrifying because you've seen that in pictures of cross burnings. And it was sort of like a Ku Klux Klan thing. And that was pretty traumatic.
Hi, my name is Michelle Hall. I'm a resident of the River Terrace community. I moved here back in the 70s when I was 14 years old. We moved from Northwest DC to Northeast, which is the River Terrace community, is located in the Northeast section of the city. It was a big, major transition for me. I lived near Meridian Hill Park. You had Calorama Road skating ring, 5 movie theaters that I was able to walk to. You had a lot of things in that area that were very walkable. River Terrace was a little different. It was definitely residential. I was coming from what I call a real urban setting to a more residential setting. I decided for the 75th anniversary of the River Terrace Community organization function that we had at the Chateau on January the 25th, 2020, that instead of having, I selected 2 high school students. One was Maurice and the other one was Edward. And instead of us having the students read the article, I decided we would act out the article from the April 4th, 1949 Washington Post write-up on the Von Blassingames moving into the River Terrace community and being the first African-American family to integrate the community. So the article dealt with Otis Von Blassingame and his wife Georgetta and their baby Otis Jr. And it also mentioned something about their friends, the Paynes. And the idea just came to me to say, let's be a little creative with this while we're sharing for the 75th anniversary, add a little flavor to it. And so the young men did very well. Edward was the narrator. Maurice played Mr. Otis Von Blassingame. I played the wife, Georgetta. We incorporated a little music, acted out how we felt, the excitement that the Von Blassingames must have felt on them initially moving into the community that first day, but how then they were met with some opposition, and I'm sure they prepared themselves for some of this, knowing that they were going to be the first black family to move into a community. But no matter how you prepare yourself for something, it's still hurtful and can be quite devastating when you're met with a lot of hostile opposition. So we did our best to role play in the characters, and our goal was to make it as realistic as we could, but also entertaining as well as informative. And as I was developing this skit, it allowed me to learn a lot about, to learn some things also about the couple, the Von Blassingame and their child that moved into our community. And I did also a little more research to try to pull in some facts. I'm here with a young man who had the chance to play Mr. Otis Von Blassingame. This was during the River Terrace Community 75th anniversary. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself and what it was like to take on the role of Mr. Otis Von Blassingame.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Hall. I am currently a senior at Emory University, but I got the opportunity to portray Mr. Von Blassingame back in 2020 when I was 15, and I am a member of the River Terrace community.
Well, how did you prepare for your character, or how did you assume the role of your character?
Yeah, so I wasn't familiar with Mr. Von Blassingame, and I didn't really know all too much about the history of River Terrace at the time, but coming into this role, it required a lot of research, so I learned a lot about him. And it also requires some perspective taking and putting yourself in his shoes, imagining what he and his family would have been through and trying to portray that respectfully and really bring that to life.
So that's basically my story about how I came about developing the skit, performing the skit. I enjoyed working with Edward and Maurice. They were very cooperative, excited, didn't mind practicing. Some students or some children would say, oh, that's just too much, but they never said that. And and I'm glad and I'm hope that they learned a lot as well from the article and acting it out and actually immersing ourselves into the roles. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Wanda Carter, and known as Reverend Wanda Carter. I've been living in River Terrace since 1955. My parents bought their home over here. We were introduced to this community by a realtor, Mr. Lambware, who informed my mother through a social agent who was our life insurance agent, who introduced my mom to this area and my dad. River Terrace, if you never heard about River Terrace, it's because you probably either have been lived in District of Columbia for any period of time, or you just arrived. River Terrace always had been noticed and notified by a lot of people of the District of Columbia, even from the council members, even from the mayor. We have always been established. River Terrace Community Organization is a wonderful organization who's been established for many, many years. And we have a web page that you can visit and find all the details and information, our history, background, how we got here, what was here before we got here, what is here now. And I think you will enjoy it. Once you visit the web page of our history of the River Terrace community, you will see that the River Terrace Civil Association was first named, and now our new name is River Terrace Community Organization. So our name was changed, but we are still the same people and persons. Well, since I've been here, and I was the president in 2003 and to 2004. We had senior citizens parade and awards given out by Council Member Chavers, Calvin Chavers, Mayor Williams, who sponsored everything for us. We had T-shirt contests. We had King and Queen contests. We had a talent show contest. We had River Terrace Community Organization Day, where we had the parade and we had different committees form different activities for us in the River Terrace Park. A lot of dignitaries came to visit with us. We were very organized and had plenty of fun for the children, for the young adults, and for the seniors. We always looked out for a community overall.
That's our presentation. If anybody wants to learn more about our upcoming physical tour in spring, feel free to scan this code. I hope that you understood from the webinar that there is just so much active, vibrant, textured history in our community. There's just too much to cram into a single webinar. So we're in the process of organizing a physical walk through River Terrace where you're able to visit the sites that we've spoken about in the webinar. You're able to visit the Von Blassingame House. It's still there. Some of the other sites that we would like to show you is the Varick Memorial AME Zion Church, located at 255 Anacostia Avenue Northeast, designed by Charles I. Bryant, which was built in 1980, but is on the site of an earlier Episcopal church, which was opened in 1947. We'd love to show you the River Terrace Rose Garden, which is across the road from the church. That was where Luvenia C. Miller and the River Terrace Lawn Rangers established a community garden as part of the Lady Bird Johnson City Beautification Campaign, which ran from 1963 to 1969. So that's an active side of community engagement, where the RTCO Environmental Committee is re-establishing that site with native plantings. We'd love to show you the Chateau Lounge, which is under new management at the moment, which is where Michelle Hall and Maurice Hall performed their skit on the Von Blassingames. The River Terrace Education Campus, which when it was being constructed, there were American Indian artifacts uncovered there in an archaeological dig. And then spend time in River Terrace Park, where you're able to meet some of the neighbors, and you can meet Ann Dennis, meet Wanda Carter, meet all of us on the committee, and hear our stories. So thank you again for joining us. And we
Can I
are,
just say,
yeah.
can I just say something? I'm Candace Gordon, co-chair of the Arts, Culture, and Events Committee. I'm so honored that so many people have taken time, just as Matthew echoed earlier, to be here tonight. This has been an amazing presentation that has come together through volunteer work and just a lot of sacrifice and work and in support of the River Terrace Community Organization. Just want to say that, like, as we try and get information out about this community that's sort of sequestered in this very small part of DC. Part of that also comes with, as some of you may know, one of our main anchors is Stadium Armory and RFK. And we know that that's all being, like, it's been torn down now and it's being redeveloped. And there's a lot of new development that's sort of exciting and coming east of the river and surrounding our community. And one thing that we want to do is, as we preserve the history and celebrate it and get more people knowing about River Terrace and interested in all that is going on here, is that we want to make sure that we are able to get sort of the support and services that many other parts of the city already enjoy. And so we're so happy and honored that you all took your time tonight. Please spread the word about River Terrace, because as we go through all the negotiations throughout the city and through government about what should come east of the river, particularly to the stadium redevelopment and all the communities surrounding it, the more that people know about River Terrace, the more that they'll understand that, like, we need to continue on with this community and make sure that they are served and honored in a way that is even and across the city. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for Matthew. Thank you, DC Preservation League. Thank you, Jesse, for putting all of our tech together. None of us could have done that. You've been amazing. And all of the volunteers that we've had who have shared their stories tonight. We look forward to meeting you all again in the spring physically and going through this tour and walking through our beautiful neighborhood.
Thanks, Candace. And thank you for the presentation. I think we're ready for questions now. Are you, Matthew, Candace, Jesse, you ready for questions? So if our audience has any questions, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you so you can answer them.
Also, we have some additional committee members logged in as panelists. So if they would raise their hand, Rebecca will identify who they are and give them microphone access, because we would also like them to have the opportunity to field some of these questions and also feedback.
Okay, will do. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, a wonderful presentation. We've lived in Kingman Park, C Street Northeast, since 1987, and I had some sense of the history. But is the video of this going to be available? I'd like to share it with a couple of neighbors.
Yes, we'll make this available on our YouTube site.
Okay, thank you. Splendid presentation. The historical dimension helps us cope with the current, shall we say, challenging times.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, I'm just looking for the members here. One second.
Everywhere having these same conversations. My happy ending marriage is my happy ending.
Okay. Ayana, would you like to ask your question?
I would. This is Ayana Williams, River Terrace resident. So grateful for the River Terrace Community Organization, Arts and Culture Committee, and the other collaborators who are part of today's presentation. So thank you, and I really look forward to attending the tour in person. My question is, I was wondering if some of the archivists and historians that pulled together some of the information about the history of the houses, as well as the first family that segregated River Terrace, if you could share what were some of the resources and data that you used in order to build this story and history of River Terrace? Where did you find this information beyond the stories, the oral stories?
Okay. Yeah, because he's a little neater. The chef kitchen in the back.
Oh, we've got some interference.
Matthew, do you want to
Somebody's
start?
television is on.
Jesse, I would be happy for you to kick that off because I think you have been invaluable in terms of your ability to dig through archives.
Yeah, so to create and start delving back into this history, the first thing I did is those maps are all pulled from the Library of Congress. Those are very accessible archived items that you can access. And so I used maps, specifically property ownership maps and sort of things like that, where they were more likely to list people to find those individuals. And then from the names I found on the maps, I went back and looked into typically either legal filings or tax records to pull additional names. And then from those kind of tax records, which are like the head of the family, that gave me a family member's name. And then from there, I would go look for personal artifacts or images of those individuals. That's for folks within the recorded history. For pre-contact individuals, we're much more reliant on artifactual history. And I do want to note that oral storytelling that you see in many pre-contact nations and Native American nations is a form of formal archiving. So that's another area to explore, to sort of, just like I paired the maps with the tax records, we can pair the artifacts with those robust oral histories and get a more concrete record. I will note that it's an endless process. I thought I had a really good grasp on it when I came into this webinar, and I looked up one of the names, David, who was enslaved here in River Terrace, just by kind of a happenstance, and I found his children's names like today as I was putting this together without time to put it in there. So it's constantly evolving to find these individuals, but it's critical, especially when you're looking at a living community, to know who came before and who was here.
Great, thank you. Chris Warren has a question.
Hi, thanks very much for this presentation. I'm a resident of the Hillbrook neighborhood near Fort Mahon, so I'm a frequent traveler through River Terrace. I'm just wondering if in your archivist and putting the story together, you've looked at the history of the southernmost block of River Terrace that was removed for the construction of the East Capitol Highway, and there must be a story there that of the government overreach or eminent domain or something, and also how that might resonate today as people have some concerns with the new stadium coming. What was the history of the neighborhood when the first new stadium came along? Thanks.
So I have an image that I think was shared in the presentation. This partly answers the question. I'm going to have to, if I can share my screen, I can quickly do this. So this image is from an archive that I inherited from Deborah Grimstead, who was a longtime River Terrace resident and had assembled a collection of documents through neighborhood contributions, contributions from neighbors, but also through her father, George Gurley, who was the president of the River Terrace Community Organization. So to partly answer your question, in the background of this image, you can after the line of cars on the right-hand side at the back, you can see an apartment building, which was one of a series of three that were demolished to make way for East Capitol. So this, I think, kind of maybe hints to what the research process is. I myself don't know much about the legislation that would have been utilized to access that area of land. I do know that those three apartment buildings, which were part of the original construction of River Terrace, were destroyed to make way for East Capitol, the East Capitol Street Bridge. So that's a connection that definitely needs more research. And then I'm sorry, there was a second part to that question.
Just sort of tying that occasion in, I guess, 56, 55, when the bridge was, the intent of that bridge was to ease congestion into the city, to ease the transit into the new stadium that was being constructed at that time, and just how that would be an interesting sort of story that might resonate today with the neighborhood's concerns. Another archival source is aerial photography. There are some great aerial photographs going back to 1949 available that you can see that transition of the neighborhood, particularly the removal of that block for the highway. Thanks again for the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And up next is Lauren. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, please. Can you hear me? Is the tech working?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is fabulous. Thank you, everybody who has been involved with this. I was actually just curious. Well, you mentioned that some Native American artifacts had been found. Do we know, are they viewable anywhere? Do we know anything about what was found? And do we know, like, as you know, you see a lot of houses getting renovated or expanded. Like, do we know over time if any more have been found?
No. Want me to take that one, Matthew? So, other than the record that they were found, we haven't personally examined the artifacts. I have already added to my to-do list just from the questions and wonderful suggestions during this webinar. But we do know historically, Nacotchtank was a trade center, so it was a crossroads. So we're going to, I would imagine, we would see pretty robust artifacts, especially in a high population area and an important, urban site like that we would see potentially, obviously from that extent culture, but also from the other nations that were in the area. So our next steps there are to reach out to city resources, so city archaeologists, to start piecing together that history. We're sort of in the wayfinding part of the history to start piecing it together at this point.
Oh, that's really cool. And yeah, please keep us posted if whatever's found. But thank you, everybody. This has been lovely.
If I can just add quickly, there is a local academic who has offered to help us, quote unquote, excavate that part of River Terrace's history. So we will be working closely with her moving forward. I know of that there was documentation of oyster roasting pits and some other archaeological evidence. I'm not entirely sure. I know that there is probably a lot more that we need to find out about.
Great. And
A
there's a
guess,
question.
and it's certainly just a guess. I don't know at all. This is certainly not my wheelhouse, but along the river is where we're going to be finding. So any contacts we have or organizations, like that's probably going to be one of the main sources of information that we can get, because that's likely where you would find those kinds of artifacts and things. I'm guessing.
Great question. Thank you. So in the question and answer, there was a question about that from Leslie. I was told A. Philip Randolph stayed in River Terrace during the planning of the March on Washington. Does anyone have info on this? Not yet. Okay, well, that might be something to look into. Next question. Sorry, Leslie. This question's from Laurice. Is there a relationship between Mayfair Mansions and River Terrace?
No.
No. Okay. And secondly, does it appear that with the stadium rebuild that there is apprehension of a southwest displacement event about to happen?
No.
No. Okay, great.
I can elaborate on two of those. Mayfair Mansions, if I'm not mistaken, is to the north of us near Kenilworth Gardens, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So there is, our ANC Commissioner, Katie Murphy, has mentioned that there are plans afoot to build through a road that would cross directly from River Terrace over Benning Road through the old Pepco plant site, possibly connecting our neighborhood to that area of the city, we don't know. And what was the second part of that question? I'm sorry.
Are the residents concerned about displacement?
I mean, I think that depends on who you ask. I have definitely spoken to residents, older residents who are worried about a spike in property tax. I think that's a very real concern with any kind of development, urban development that comes to any part of DC. I think we've seen it happen before. I think that there are people like building bridges across the river who are approaching urban development as a long-term strategy. So consulting in depth with communities over a period of 10 years to find out exactly what they're looking for when these developments happen. I know that community benefit agreements are currently in discussion in relation to RFK. I'm not sure how those will be implemented. I think time will tell.
For sure. So I've now, Roz, you're up for your question now.
Yes, good evening. I have two questions. I'm on Clay Place. When I had my bathroom renovated, a bunch of razors came from the ceiling. What is that? And the other question is, some houses have basements and some do not. Were the basements like in the first phase and then they phased that out, or what was the explanation for that?
I know the answer to the razor question. Matthew, I don't know the answer to the basement one. So you or Michelle might have that answer. The razor is sometimes you would see storage, disposal slots built into the homes, for straight, kind of like the straight razor disposal. And like you, I learned that during a process in which I had to have an apartment in Boston I lived in fixed, and also had razors fall out of my wall, and was told and saw firsthand that feature that's no longer commonly seen in houses.
Hi, this is Reverend Carter. I know she asked the question about why some houses have basements and some does not. Well, Clay Place and Dick Street and Clay Street, one side does not have basements, and I was told it was based on the ground itself, the elevation of the ground. That's why we don't have basements. I was told that much long time ago.
So
Whether
I
that's
don't
true.
know the answer to that for sure. And
No,
Reverend
I'm just
Carter.
trying, I'm just trying to open up the window. Not that
Yeah, yeah. I think part of that, I think a large part of that has to do, we live in a floodplain. People don't,
yes, it
it's a
is.
very
Yeah, because it was
centuries long floodplain, but like certainly the houses around Anacostia wouldn't have basements because they're right on the river. And that would just be such a
well,
risk. I don't
well,
know that that's the reason, but I think that would be one idea as to why that might have been.
no. Now some houses on Anacostia Avenue does have basements. Right there at Dick Street corner and Clay Place corner, they have basements. The houses that after Clay Place corner to the church doesn't have it because they were the last developers right there. They were the last built in this community. I'm still saying that we can really check it, but she asked the question, and I was told by one of the developers over here that that's why we didn't have basements because of the land.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting question because
Yeah, it
it
is.
seems to be very like block to block.
Mm-hmm.
And the floodplain may have something to do with it, and there could be the land, it could be all kinds of things. But
Mm-hmm.
I would certainly be interested in learning
Yeah,
more about that.
absolutely.
There was a creek that ran underneath part of these houses on Clay and Baker.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally, back in the 50s and 60s, when it would rain a lot,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we would get water in the yards, and sometimes it would come into the basement. Um, Fortunately, I'm in a curve that kind of takes it away
Mm-hmm.
to another. But the house is right in the middle of that
Mm-hmm.
street.
That creek is visible
And there
That
were
that creek is.
artifacts found down there on, oh, excuse me, Matthew, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anne. That creek, I just wanted to point out that creek is visible on some of the maps that Jesse referenced. It is still there. It's just, I think, been put underground, as many of them in DC have.
Yeah. And then and the houses that are on from Clay to Clay Place, the last that were built, there were artifacts that were down there in the woods. And the kids dug them up, and I'm trying to find, because there was pieces of arrows and pieces of pottery and stuff. And of course, back then, I think kids were not aware that that was something that they were playing with and trading. And I guess we weren't thinking of the history of River Terrace at that time.
Clay Place was Clay Place houses were built in 1940, what, 9?
Now I'm talking about on Anacostia.
Oh yeah, Anacostia, yes. They were the last ones to come up. Yes.
I know, because it was a woods, and I played in them.
Yeah. They were. I did too.
I played in those woods. And
absolutely.
They used to have pine cones there, and we used to go and the brownies used to go and get the pine cones off. They were really pretty pine trees. And one time they decorated one of the trees that was near the corner.
All right.
We have a question from the Q&A. It's asking, what house did the first Black family that moved to River Terrace live in?
That is a Dolores. That is a Dolores question.
It was the house on Ames Street, the 3300 block of Ames Street, the second house from the corner.
Yeah, it's very close to East Capitol, and it's still there. And one of our committee members resides in the house right next to it.
Good. And a question from the Chevy Chase DC Conservancy, wondering whether or not you all are likely to explore becoming a historic district.
I think so.
It's always a loaded question in DC. You never know. So,
Maybe Jesse would be best positioned to, I don't know, Jesse, could you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever you consider becoming a historic district, especially in a city like DC that's so rife with history and also has aging buildings and neighborhoods deserving of preservation, I think the question we always have to ask is, what is the best method to preserve a space and protect our historic spaces? And if when you ask that question, that option comes into the discussion. So it's one of those never say never, but always centralizing the preservation of the community that is here in the best way possible. And sometimes that's it. And sometimes there's other avenues that are more adept at that preservation process.
Yeah, I think there's ways that we can preserve our history that don't necessarily have to exist within a formalized structure in that way. And I think part of the work that we're doing now is that. And I think to Jesse's point, our community and what we tried to make clear in the webinar is that our community is constantly evolving. So that might, mean, redeveloping a house or redeveloping a property or doing things that a kind of historic district would not allow you to do. And one of the things that you'll know if you live here is that our homes are very small. The original Santmyer houses were kind of 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom with a basement if you were lucky. And those have all kind of been redeveloped to fit the needs of growing families. So you will speak to people in Spring who've raised generations of families here. And what's fascinating is if you walk through the neighborhood is to see the ways that houses have flexed and bended to accommodate growing families in this part of DC. So that's what I think makes our community very unique and maybe just different to what you'd encounter in a historic district.
Great. So River Terrace, who's listed here, is that a committee member or do they have a question? We've been patiently waiting. I wasn't sure.
Oh, this is Doris Bishop. I'm the president for the community organization, and I just wanted to commend Matthew and the entire committee in conjunction with, of which I am a part of the committee too. Um, commend Jesse and the preservation group for an excellent presentation and for all that participated. River Terrace has a very rich history, a very long history, and a very wonderful history that's worth preservation. And I just want to commend everyone for the outstanding work that they put into this. And I often wondered why River Terrace was named as Lily Ponds instead of River Terrace. That shows up in the real estate books. So I've had that overall overarching question in my head. So maybe that's something for me to research. So if
Great.
anyone has any input on that, that would be helpful.
I think that's a real estate strategy to try and sell houses.
Sell houses. That's all it was.
Yeah, I don't think that's real.
Yeah, but that's exactly what it was.
We've
Great.
always been River Terrace and we always will be River Terrace. And that's
All
the
right.
only name.
Yeah.
That's right. Always.
And so a question from Lauren, is there a history of the community and the planning of metro stops?
Yeah. As far as I know, I don't know what the dates are, but I know that the current metro stop, which is on Minnesota Avenue, there will be residents who can speak to this who've been around a lot longer than I have, but that station was initially planned for River Terrace. And I know that that was vociferously opposed by residents of River Terrace at that time. I don't know what that date is. I need to look it up because they were concerned that it would change the environment in the community and bring kind of unwanted elements into the community. So that and the off-ramp from 295, the exit from 295 into River Terrace was something that was fought for by River Terrace.
Great. Couple of open questions in the chat. Just some information from Jean Campbell that several of the children grew up in River Terrace community, grew up to be officials in the government. On the first female, one is the first female, excuse my son behind me. It's that witching hour. One of the first female police in DC, the divisional fire chief, James Short, who is still living. And this is Jean Campbell from 35th Street who offered that information, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And then, and is there a place where where the attendees can find the anniversary video that was referenced in the presentation?
Michelle? Michelle Hall has that copy.
Yes, I have it. I guess we can make it accessible. And I'll work with Matthew and Jesse, on how we can add it to a link. And I was very grateful to the two young men, Edward Stone and Maurice Hall, very good participants and just a joy to work with.
I will just take this moment to say that we are urgently looking for anybody that can help us redesign our website to accommodate that kind of material. That is definitely something that we want to do. So if there's anybody in attendance that is willing to do pro bono website development work, please email us and let us know. We would welcome your talents. We want to create a resource on our website that houses some of this material for people to access.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? See there was just some information that was put in the question and answer, which we'll copy and give to the presenters here today. But if no other questions, then we'll wrap this up, and I'll thank River Terrace for a fantastic presentation. And I learned a lot tonight. I have to be honest, I didn't know much about your community, so this was very fascinating. I look forward to learning more and partnering with you all in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yes, thank you for being
Thank
with
you
us.
so much. You've been wonderful.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
that's all for us tonight, everyone. So be safe and have a good night. And we look forward to seeing you at the next DCPL event. Thank you.
Thank you
Good
all.
night.
Have a good evening.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night.